Snow came sideways, not like weather, but like a scraped knee across the sky. And under it the ocean breathed in short, shocked gasps that broke along black rock and turned to steam. The siren started as a thread and braided itself into the wind until the cliff line vibrated with the sound. Red strobes stuttering across the ice-slick asphalt of a coastal service road that officially didn't exist. A crate the size of a small house sat chained to a flatbed with weld seams fat as knuckles and hazard glyphs that made the eye feel like it was turning too slowly. The metal looked tired. The straps looked like memories of better straps. No camera faced the crate because no camera was allowed to, and yet somewhere a lens had seen something it should not. Perhaps a reflection in the back of a medic's visor. Perhaps the cheap chrome of a wrench lost in a snowbank. Perhaps the human eye itself replayed against the inside of a skull. The air around the crate held a sound that wasn't a sound. The pre-cry breath that happens when grief chooses violence. A wet inhale that could belong to a child about to break. Stretched over too many decibels. 15 kilometers out to sea, the water rose without a storm to justify it, and held its shape like a hand under a table. In its center, a circle of white formed, not light but heat-bending snow into rain and rain back into snow. And in that circle something fell. It did not fall like a body. It fell like an answer. Feet kissed the surface once, and the sea forgave the trespass and laid him softly on the swell. Then gravity remembered its job, and the figure sank with a delighted sound that should have belonged to summer. He surfaced laughing, hair plastered, eyes bright with the kind of hunger that isn't about food, and he took the world's measure the way a sailor does. By the taste of salt on the teeth and the angle of the wind against the ear. Somewhere behind the storm, a voice began to scream. He cocked his head, squinted through weather that tried too hard to be impressive, and turned toward shore. The first step he took was not on water or air. It was on his own certainty, the simple bone-deep assumption that the world was elastic and would oblige him if he grinned at it right. The sea stretched, and he ran. On the road, men in armor carried rules like shields, and those rules were all made of don'ts. Don't look, don't record, don't reflect, don't stop what you can't stop because stopping it makes it worse. Their breath fogged the inside of blank visors and turned into rhyme. Their hands made gestures that had been trained into them by rooms with no windows, and a tone of voice that understood nightmares better than budgets. A sergeant's mouth shaped the syllables of a name no one should speak twice in one sentence, and his throat refused to finish it, as if the sound itself had splinters. The crate flexed. A chain answered with a harp-string twang, not musical, bone deep. The world held still the way a playground holds still when the big kid stops laughing. Then the steel tore. It didn't burst or fail or explode. It tore like paper thumbed just right along a fold. And the cold that lived in the crate rolled out and bit everything that had skin and everything that remembered having skin. The first thing that came out was not a limb or a head, but a pair of hands that wanted to be torsos. The suggestion of fingers that missed their mark and tried again. Claws finding angle in the air instead of on target because target hadn't had time to make a mistake yet. The second thing was the sound, the inhale again. Closer, so close it felt like standing too near a bathroom door when someone sobs on the other side and you're 12 and you don't know if you should knock or run. The third was a head that hated being seen and had come to this exact moment to punish the universe for inventing faces. It rose like a bad decision under a good sky. Long, white, wrong, with teeth that belonged to an animal big enough to make architects nervous and eyes that weren't eyes because they never looked at anything. Not even the thing they were going to kill. The soldiers did what training says. They turned their heads away and stared at nothing and gave their bodies to instinct and noise. One of them slipped because the road was more honest than doctrine, and his visor caught the reflection of a reflection in the chrome of a fuel cap. And the human machine misfired and recognized a pattern that wasn't meant for recognizing, and the pattern recognized him back. He died in all the ways that follow that kind of recognition. But none of those ways had time to finish because the thing in the crate forgot distance and stood exactly where his living had been an instant ago. The flatbed screamed as weight that didn't weigh landed and then wasn't there. Footprints in the snow that were holes through to gravel melting round the edges. The thing sobbed once, a child's hitch that had learned to be a weapon. And the world became a hallway where running is the only verb. The man on the sea reached the cliff edge, saw the road, saw the ruin of chains, and saw the shape of a problem that smelled like a promise. He did not see a face. He saw the absence of a face, and the story gravity tells when it runs out of patience. The scream ran at him. It did not cross the space between. The space lost an argument and got out of the way. He was already smiling because danger is a kind of weather and he likes weather, and because the roar that ate the distance wore despair like a coat. And he has a soft spot for despair that tries to be scary. He put his heel down, and the asphalt gave a little in the way asphalt doesn't. And he bent with his knee in the way a sapling does in the wind. And he let his body remember that it was made to be a joke at physics' expense. Snow became not snow. Tension knitted into white ropes under his soles, and he slung himself sideways just enough to let the blur pass, and the blur had claws that knew the shape of rib cages and didn't get to finish the thought. Impact happened behind him and took a piece of cliff with it as payment. He spun on the rubber of his own certainty and put his hand out like you would for a friend who's trying to leave the party, and he caught a wrist that didn't want to be a wrist. It should have been like grabbing a helicopter blade. It was like grabbing a deer in a tangle of wire. He felt strength that had never been allowed to be anything except straight line, and he loved it for a heartbeat the way you love a storm that hasn't decided where to break. Then he remembered every rule he didn't bother with and every one that mattered. Don't look, don't reflect, don't let other people die for your curiosity. Wind pushed his hair into his eyes and saved his life in some small way, kept angles soft, made the world a smear. The white head snapped, hunting a line from eye to eye that would close a circuit and turn him from obstacle into quarry. He laughed in its face without giving it a face to aim at and said nothing out loud because words make shape and shape makes targets. And instead he let the laugh carry the shape of what he meant. Not today. The thing sobbed again like something breaking in a stairwell, and the soldiers in armor took a step their training didn't have a name for. Backward. He took a step their assumptions didn't have a name for. Forward. Rubber happened. Not in the way of tires or bands or children's toys. Rubber in the way of second chances, in the way of a door that turns a wall into an idea. His arm lengthened into a question mark, and the question was simple. Can I move you without breaking you? His fist tapped the pale temple with the weight of a bell, and the bell rang inside bone, not loud enough to be cruel, loud enough to tell the nervous system a different story about gravity. The body that had forgotten how to fall fell. Snow sighed a crater round it that steamed with the heat of friction. The road exhaled a long-held breath, and the scream went away because the machine that made it was busy remembering what ribs are supposed to do. He squatted at the rim of the new hollow and gave the world a grin like a porch light. The white head twitched, hunting for shape to punish. He kept his shadow messy and his face out of straight lines. Somewhere behind him, a radio begged at a sky that couldn't help. Do not engage, do not look, do not record. The man on the cliff smiled at all three and engaged, and didn't look in the way the rule meant, and recorded only in the muscles of his shoulders how the thing's breath hitched just before it moved. When it moved again, it moved like fate, and he moved like refusal, and between those two verbs the road learned a new game called mercy. Snow and sirens stitched the coastline into one long nerve. and the nerve kept firing as if the world were a body remembering pain it had never suffered. The white figure in the crater convulsed, not waking so much as rejecting unconsciousness on principle, elbows finding leverage in crushed slush, fingers that were too long for forgiveness chewing at the road until steel rebar showed through like veins. Luffy felt the tremor before sound returned, that tiny pre-cry vacuum, and he knew the next sprint would come with the speed of a decision already made. So he moved first, not to strike but to shape, palms slapping down on the ruined asphalt and pulling it like dough because the world was cooperative if you treated it like a friend, and the ground rose in a gentle hump that would force any straight-line charge into a curve. Behind the visors, the Foundation shuffled its courage into formations. Blindfolds adjusted by gloved hands, rifles angled at empty air by doctrine that knew ballistics were theater today. A lieutenant's voice clipped by static assigning zones of death that were already obsolete, and someone muttered a prayer hot enough to fog their mask. The head in the crater snapped to a listening stillness, and then the scream came. The sob that gathered itself into a blade and cut through weather and bone and patience, and the figure went from prone to everywhere in less time than it takes for fear to touch a spine. It hit the hump Luffy had made and skidded, claws carving trenches that filled with boiling meltwater. And in the same breath it corrected with the elegance of a nightmare that has had practice, leaping sideways, hunting a straight sightline that eyes could close too late to matter. Luffy denied the line again by becoming a blur of curved path and stupid joy, leaning into a slide that shouldn't exist on dry road, knee-scuffing sparks and heel birthing a coil of rubber pavement that rebounded his body into a new angle as if the planet had become a trampoline. He wasn't faster than it in the way meters measure, but he was better at telling space a joke it wanted to laugh at. And that kept him alive as claws hammered the place he had stopped being half a heartbeat ago, pulverizing concrete into snow finer than the storms. A soldier lost his footing, flailed, and in that flail his visor tilted enough to flash a smear of pale against the inner curve, a reflection of nothing that somehow counted. And Luffy didn't think. He just flung an arm like a lasso around the man's torso and yanked him bodily sideways into a banked drift as the air his head had occupied became the wrong address for flesh. The scream shortened, the breaths between charges getting tighter, more efficient, like a metronome taught anger, and Luffy heard in it an old rhythm he hated, moment before movement where grief gulps air. So he timed himself to that gulp, each microsecond an elastic loop he could widen or tighten, stretching the beat until the sprint missed the music. The lieutenant realized the road was becoming a killing ground for his people and barked a fallback, orange chem lights whipping arcs as teams retreated by muscle memory into a corridor of snowplow berms toward a blind convoy. A train of boxy APCs with slit-thin visors welded shut, guidance by braided ropes and shouted distances, each vehicle wrapped in black canvas like a hearse, and the doors banged open onto black interior mazes built for the purpose of getting lost without mirrors. "Move it, move it, move it," the old god of procedures sang, and discipline made a path that fear alone could not. Luffy ran alongside that path, keeping the thing's attention the way a lighthouse keeps a reef busy, taunting with motion but never with face, and the creature took the bait because the script inside it only had 2 pages. Be unseen and kill what is seen. Snow hissed under its steps, steam tails whipping, the world narrowing to this running argument between a god of freedom and a prisoner of a compulsion written like a curse into its cells. A gunner got stupid or brave and fired a line of tracers across the sprint to buy a heartbeat, sparks bouncing off pallid hide with no purchase, the bullet's heat making the thing smell briefly like burnt frost in old hospital. Luffy snapped his rubberized road hump taller, a soft barricade that turned that next straight charge into a stumble, and he flipped forward off the rising edge into a roll that launched him under the beast's armpit. If anatomy there had the decency of a name. palm slapping its flank. Not a punch, a note. And the note said, "This way." And its weight complied for a fraction because everything in this world yielded to a good rhythm. "Keep your heads down," the lieutenant roared, a sentence that tasted like blood and authority, and he dragged the last straggler by the collar into the blind convoy's mouth as Luffy skated the thing's momentum sideways into the asphalt, a belly flop that buckled the road and popped manhole covers 3 blocks inland. The scream reset, wet inhale scraping his skull, and the sprint would find him again unless he changed the room. So he did, springing up tall and taller, hair standing as if electrified by his own delight, breath going light and high and foolish even here, even now, and the snow around his ankles ratcheted into little drums under invisible hands, the world feeling the urge to laugh and obeying. And that was the beginning of the change the sailors of Grand Line would have called legend, and the Foundation would label XK-class reality malleation event if they survived to label it. The white of his eyes ran to star white, the line of his grin cut wider than bone, shadows of old drums and old suns and a god that danced where law was a suggestion flashed in the storm light, and the snow under his feet stopped being weather and became an instrument. The thing launched claws and hunger and met a sheet of air that had the consistency of carnival rubber. Not a shield, a refusal, the universe disagreeing politely, and it bounced, not far, just enough to make its next choice sloppy. Luffy grabbed the gust of wind as if it were rope, spun it into a loop that should not hold shape, and hogtied a tornado across the road, pinning the next charge long enough to sweep an arm and change the texture of the world to soft. APC doors slammed, engines growled. The convoy lurched into a white labyrinth whose ceilings were tarps and whose walls were snow-pressed by graters into blind canyons, guiding everything toward the black mouth of a tunnel that should not be on any map. The creature didn't do tunnels. Tunnels implied boundaries. Tunnels also made lines of sight shorter, and this mattered, so it sprinted for the last visible movement, which was Luffy flipping backwards into the drift like a boy off a pier. And it followed into the maze, smashing the first corner into crumbs. Inside, the sound changed. Siren muffled to heartbeat, wind traded for breathing, muffled boots thudding, radios clicking like teeth in a glass. And Luffy let the walls bend with him, hands pressing them wide enough a foot before impact to make corridors bellies instead of knives, then letting them snap back after the white figure passed to slow it without making it stop, because stopping would force choices he didn't want. A blind corner almost introduced a squad to death. Luffy stole the corner and ate it, tugged it long enough that the men stumbled through a corridor that had never existed for 2 seconds, then snapped back into geometry like a magician embarrassed at being caught, leaving 096 to rake claws through empty air where warm lives had been a blink ago. A soldier's breath hitched into that human pre-sob, and the thing's head turned toward it with the terrible tenderness of a predator that loves one thing only. And Luffy hated that sound suddenly with a personal, stupid hate. Not for the monster, but for the universe that had taught this shape to use grief as a compass. And he clapped his hands, and the clap didn't make noise. It made rubber, a membrane that stretched across the corridor between the sound and the listener, and the hitch softened, and the sprint came half a beat late, which was the same as failing. They reached the tunnel, a wound in the cliff face lined in matte black and lined again with protocol. Double doors swallowing convoys into a throat lit by red that did not reflect, projectors firing white noise shaped like water over every surface to drown any image that tried to form. Steel teeth slid behind them, sealing snow out, and with it much of the world's mercy, because inside was only choices. The thing hit the first blast door 10 seconds after Luffy did, and the door bent like a prayer. And then it ruptured the way honesty ruptures a lie, all at once and through every layer. Inside the antechamber, the Foundation had built a maze of right angles and swallowing curtains, traps for line of sight meant to get a charging shape lost until sedatives could argue with its blood. The shape didn't get lost. It moved like a rumor through a small town, finding the shortest path as if scent were geometry. Luffy vaulted rails and catwalks, refusing the vertical logic of the place, treating the entire structure like a jungle gym offered up to his god. And when the thing was about to intersect a team that had no idea it had been intersected, he popped the catwalk into a slide and the men slid faster than panic toward a hatch that decided it had always been open. The lieutenant began to understand that the unknown benevolence in the chaos wore a straw hat. He also understood that benevolence would not be enough if any camera in any sub-level found a sliver of that pale head and bounced it into 3 monitors in a row. So he screamed for total blackout, and the power answered with all but the emergency strips dying, and red drowned the corridors in color that made pupils big and details small, and Luffy felt the building settle into the sort of fight houses have when they decide who lives inside them. The thing kept coming. Sob reduced to efficient fuel, claws finding the seams between panels by learned luck. And Luffy realized he couldn't keep hurting forever because forever was the one thing this monster had an argument with. So he changed the terms, grabbed the floor with both hands and bounced not himself but the entire corridor, turning gravity into a joke, pipes thumping like drums, lights hiccuping, a wave traveling down steel like laughter. The charge tripped not in clumsiness but in physics, and he met it. Palms flat to its sternum, pushing not backward but sideways into a maintenance shaft that he had convinced into being with the confidence of a liar who only lies to save lives. And then he went with it because he would not let it be alone for even a breath of its horror. The shaft spat both of them into a lower gallery where water thundered in sheets behind glass. A cooling cascade that made the air taste like pennies and electricity. And the red strips painted everything the color of meat. The view was a long corridor of steel gratings and mesh, rails humming with the fear of a building trying to be useful. Here the sight lines were longer, the risk multiplied, and the white head lifted, seeking attack paths in the reflections in the cascade. Treacherous flickers that might count as faces, and Luffy, heart punching his ribs, sprinted with that idiot joy that saves fools, throwing himself between the monster and the water, arms flung wide, trusting that his stupid grin, blurred by spray and speed, would be unreadable enough to avoid the rule while big enough to pull hatred like a magnet. He heard the wet inhale start again, learned the measure of it the way a drummer learns a room, and he began to beat time with his feet, soles stamping a rhythm into the bridge grating, a ridiculous dance in a serious place, the god of freedom asking a sob to take a breath on his count, and for the first time the scream arrived a hair's breadth off its favorite timing, and that hair's breadth was an ocean he could swim in, water sprayed through the vents like fine glass, and the sound became a tremor instead of a roar, as if the structure itself were afraid to echo too loudly. The monster crouched, its limbs coiling in unnatural symmetry, and the air compressed around its chest. Luffy could feel the scream building before it came, that vibration crawling through the pipes and into his own bones. He didn't brace. He grinned wider the way someone grins right before they throw themselves off a cliff, and his whole body flashed in white. Gear 5 responding like laughter to danger. The floor curved beneath him as though the world had remembered it was soft, steel rolling in waves under his feet while the monster launched. Its claws tore the air open in front of it, each swing fast enough to blur red into white. Luffy met it mid-air. There was no tactic, only instinct, a punch that bent the corridor's shape around his arm like rubber glass. The impact didn't make sound, it erased it. For a heartbeat, every red light flickered to black. And then the pressure reversed and the wave went outward, flinging both of them into opposite ends of the gallery. Water cracked the glass behind the monster and poured in sheets, drowning the alarms in static hiss. Luffy pushed himself up, body steaming, eyes wild and joyous even through pain. "You can't help it, huh?" he whispered to himself, voice swallowed by flood. The creature had no answer, only a sound that could have been sobbing if not for the metal in it. He lunged again, stretching his arm across collapsing girders, using debris as anchors, turning falling architecture into a slingshot. The creature met him halfway, its ribs glowing with inner heat like coals. When they collided, gravity inverted for a breath. The cascade behind them turned upward, water curling into the ceiling as if confused by which way was down. Luffy's hair streamed white in the flicker of emergency lights. He could feel his heartbeat sinking to the rhythm of the facility, every thump answering the deeper pulse of containment systems breaking one by one. For a second, the fight almost became beautiful, a dance between light and the absence of face, between joy and despair. Then the glass finally shattered. They fell together into the water, cold so dense it felt solid, depth swallowing them in half a second. Sound dulled. Even the monster's scream became a pressure rather than a noise. Luffy spun, hair floating like a halo, watching the pale shape twitch and twist, unable to orient in this new element. He thought, "It's never learned to breathe here." He spread his hands. Rubber flowed from his palms like ribbons, forming domes of bubbles that flickered with lightning as they rose. He used them as steps, bouncing off each one, chasing the blur downward into darker green. SCP-096 no longer moved in lines. Here it coiled like a wounded eel, its rage diffused by cold. Luffy reached it, wrapped his arms around its chest and squeezed, not to crush but to still it. The body convulsed, claws tearing his shoulders, but he held on, laughing through the water that tried to steal the sound. "Shh, it's okay." The words came out as silver air. The thing jerked again, a flash of white in the dark, its face inches from his, and in that instant instinct screamed, "Don't look." Luffy closed his eyes and kept smiling. He could feel it trembling, all violence without purpose, all pain with nowhere to go. "You don't want to hurt them," he thought. "You just don't know how to stop." The ocean pressed tighter, pressure building into needles behind his ears. The creature thrashed, claws gouging the sea itself, but his grip held, stronger than metal, more stubborn than pity. Something cracked. Not bone, but history. The scream came again, muffled by the deep, turning into a long sigh that bled through water like smoke. For the first time since the breach, the Foundation sensors recorded silence below 100 meters. Above them, the corridor's red lights failed completely, leaving the tunnel a throat of pure darkness. Luffy's heartbeats became the only rhythm left. He felt the monster weaken, the rigid muscles softening, confusion creeping into fury. He pulled it closer until its forehead pressed against his chest. "It's fine now," he whispered into the water. "No one's looking." The current stopped fighting. Around them, the ocean turned clear. For a few heartbeats, they drifted together, a smear of white and gold tangled in suspension like a prayer half-spoken. Then the tremor came back, different this time, vertical. The whole trench began to collapse inward, the facility sinking with the weight of its own panic. Beams cracked, turbines screamed in protest. Luffy looked upward through hundreds of meters of crushing green and decided he'd rather take the monster with him than let it drown alone. He planted his feet against the seafloor, flexed every fiber of his body, and pushed. The ocean bent. The trench vomited light. In seconds, they were moving upward through a column of rising bubbles, speed enough to tear at their skin. The surface exploded around them like breaking glass, water leaping skyward as they emerged into the storm again. Lightning painted them in black and white. The Foundation ships turned their guns away, too afraid to aim at either God or Ghost. Luffy landed on the surface of the sea as if it were rubber once more, cradling the limp white figure. The The monster shuddered, making small, almost human sounds. "You're done fighting," Luffy said softly, but even as he spoke, he saw the twitch starting again, the curse awakening. He knew it would never stop as long as it could see. He took a breath that glowed from inside, reached into the air and pulled down a cloud, kneading it into a pale sheet. The storm obeyed. Lightning wove itself into threads, closing around the creature's face like silk that hummed. When he let go, SCP-096's head was wrapped in living vapor, blind and quiet. The body stilled. For the first time, Luffy's laughter broke, not from joy but from exhaustion. The rain softened. Ship's searchlights hovered uncertainly. In that still moment, the sea was both grave and cradle. The Foundation observers didn't record anything else. Their sensors showed only noise, static shaped like a heartbeat. And above the ruin of the coastline, Luffy stood against the storm, holding the creature's silence in his arms while the world's sirens finally began to fade. The rain fell slower now, like it was ashamed of what it had witnessed. The sea, which had spent the last hour roaring like a wounded god, finally remembered it was supposed to be calm. Every wave exhaled steam. The surface glowed faintly gold where Luffy's feet touched it, each ripple bending toward him as if gravity had switched allegiance. In his arms, SCP-096 was still, trembling but no longer thrashing, its head wrapped in the cloud he'd woven from the storm. The vapor moved gently, tightening and loosening with the creature's breathing, a living blindfold. He could feel its ribs grinding against his own, every heartbeat uncertain, as if it didn't believe it had the right to keep living. He laughed once, the sound cracked and quiet. "You're heavy for someone who doesn't want to exist," he muttered. His voice wasn't mocking. It was the kind of joke people tell to keep the dark from thinking it's won. Lightning crawled sideways across the clouds, slower now, its thunder like a sigh. Luffy turned toward the distant coastline where black shapes of Foundation ships loomed. He didn't need to see their guns to know they were there, trembling behind their orders, staring through scopes they'd been told never to use. He raised a hand and waved, a small, almost lazy gesture. The men watching from the decks didn't wave back. Some lowered their heads, some prayed. Beneath them, sonar screamed and died. The ocean floor was splitting where the facility had stood. Concrete and rebar twisted, falling into itself, releasing air that had been trapped for decades. Huge black bubbles rose to the surface like the last breaths of a drowning machine. Luffy frowned. "Guess that's not done yet," he said. The creature stirred in his arms, a small twitch that felt like panic. He tightened his grip. "Stay still. You've caused enough trouble already." Then, because the universe wasn't done being cruel, the water shivered. Not from the wind, from below. A ring of red light pulsed out from the trench, the same kind that had marked SCP containment barriers. It was coming apart in layers, each seal breaking like a heartbeat. Luffy turned toward it, eyes glowing white, and saw a faint human figure inside the light projected from the ruins, a voice encoded into the storm. "Containment compromised," it said, repeating itself, metallic and distant. "All anomalous matter to be neutralized." He looked down at the pale creature. "They mean you." The wrapped head jerked, small hands clutching at his chest like a frightened child's. Luffy felt the tremor go through it, and something in him snapped, not anger, but that simple refusal to watch someone be punished for existing wrong. "No," he said. He straightened, holding the thing in both arms, and the light from his body grew until it drowned the lightning. Not this time. From the ships came the low thump of ordnance, the sound of protocols written by men who had never met mercy. The first warhead hit the sea a kilometer away, throwing up a wall of steam. The next was closer. Luffy didn't move until the third one fell straight toward them. He raised one hand. The explosion folded like paper. Waves froze mid-motion, their peaks suspended around him like teeth of glass. His grin returned, slow and dangerous. "You think I'm gonna let you shoot a scared kid?" The air itself bent, clouds twisted into spirals above his head. When he stomped once, the sea flattened for 10 miles in every direction. The blast rolled outward, a wall of wind that snuffed fire and shattered radar. Every instrument on the ships went blind. Containment breach escalating, the radio voice said again, though no one was left to hear it clearly. Luffy looked down at the creature, now curled in his arms, shaking. "You don't need to scream anymore," he said softly. "If nobody can see you, you don't have to run." He crouched and pressed one palm to the sea. The water glowed, lines of gold racing outward in a circle. The waves began to knit themselves into a dome, a sphere of calm that sank as it formed. "Sleep," he whispered. "I'll build a place where even mirrors can't find you." The dome sealed and the light dimmed. Ships drifted backward, engines dead. Inside the golden sphere, sound ended. The ocean above it solidified into a faint shimmer. To anyone watching, it was just another patch of fog. Luffy floated within, hair weightless, the wrapped figure suspended beside him. "You're free now," he said. "No rules, no faces, no fear, just quiet." The creature didn't move, but its breathing evened. Luffy closed his eyes. For a long time, there was nothing but the soft pulse of the sea. Then his laugh came back, small but bright. "You know," he said, "back home they call me the man who'll be king of the pirates. But maybe that's just another way to say I don't like cages." He touched the dome's edge. It rippled once, recognizing its maker. "So I'll make sure this one's a promise, not a prison." Outside, the Foundation's sensors came back online and saw nothing. No target, no anomaly, no God in white. The event log would later read, "Subject 096 neutralized, method unknown." But far below the surface, in a bubble of still gold light, a man with a straw hat drifted cross-legged beside a sleeping shape that had once been the world's most dangerous scream. He leaned back, looked up through the miles of water, and whispered to the dim sky, "I wonder if they'll ever learn what freedom sounds like." The sea didn't answer, but it hummed faintly as if trying to remember the tune. The hum deepened until it felt like breathing, the kind that belongs to something vast, half asleep, half aware. The water around them pulsed in slow intervals, light fading and returning as if the sea itself inhaled and exhaled. Luffy floated inside the golden sphere he had made, his body still but his mind loud. His grin had softened into something almost sad. He wasn't used to stillness. The creature beside him floated like a broken reflection, limbs weightless. The vapor still wrapped around its head, trembling faintly whenever his aura flared too bright. Every time the hum passed through, the white body twitched, unsure if the sound meant danger or forgiveness. Luffy waited. Patience to him had always been a kind of strength, one most pirates never practiced. He thought of open skies, of sails and laughter, of 1,000 loud meals that could fill silence like this to bursting. He wondered if the thing next to him had ever heard laughter before. He reached out, fingertip brushing the vapor cocoon. It quivered, then steadied. The creature's chest rose once, a sharp breath that didn't turn into a scream. That alone made him smile again. "See, you can breathe. No one's watching," he murmured, voice echoing strangely in the water. His words rippled through the gold light and came back to him slower, like they needed translation. He took that as a yes. Far above, Foundation satellites picked up the anomaly again. A sphere of unknown energy expanding within the trench, stable but active. The command room at Site 19 filled with quiet panic. No one wanted to be the one to order another strike after what happened to the fleet. They watched the telemetry as it drew a heartbeat graph that matched human rhythm almost perfectly. "It's alive," someone whispered. "Or someone inside it is." Luffy didn't care who was watching. He stretched lazily, arms looping around his knees, body luminous enough to paint the sleeping monster in soft daylight. The water no longer pressed against him. It moved with him, listening. "You know, you're kinda like me," he said after a while. "People see you and decide what you are before you even get to talk. They make rules about you, they lock you up, call it protection. Maybe they're scared they'd have to admit you didn't mean to hurt anyone." He laughed quietly. "That's what they do with freedom too." The creature stirred, a muffled sound leaking from under the veil. It wasn't rage this time, it was confusion, almost curiosity. Luffy floated closer, close enough to feel the faint pull of its body heat, or whatever passed for it. "If you're gonna stay here, you should have something to hold on to," he said, thinking aloud. He opened his hands. Light spilled from his palms, forming thin lines that spun into a ring. It expanded, becoming a circle of motion, the shape of a wave, eternal and self-contained. He pressed it gently against the creature's chest. "There. That's laughter," he whispered. "Even if you forget everything else, remember that sound. It means you're not alone." The light sank into the pale skin and vanished. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the water trembled again, this time not from outside pressure, but from a pulse within the sphere. A second heartbeat joined Luffy's, weaker but sinking. He closed his eyes. The hum of the ocean matched them both, steady now. Miles away, instruments at Site 19 froze, readings dropping to 0 as if whatever lived down there had exhaled all the energy it ever had. Command declared containment reestablished. The case file closed itself with a digital chime. No one mentioned the strange residual data, an audio trace buried under the static, soft and irregular, almost like someone laughing underwater. Deep below, the golden dome thinned, its edges dissolving into the sea. Luffy stood, the water solid beneath his feet again. The creature drifted lower, wrapped in its mist cocoon, now still as coral. He knew it wasn't dead. It was dreaming, something it had probably never done. "Sleep long," he said. "When you wake up, don't scream, just look at the light." The last of the dome faded and the ocean reclaimed its shape. No alarms, no gods, just endless blue. Luffy looked up, saw the shimmer of the sun far above, and laughed softly. He flexed, stretching until his body felt weightless, then shot upward like a cork released. The pressure dropped away, his grin widening with each meter until he burst through the surface into blinding daylight. The storm was gone. Only the quiet hiss of rain remained. He floated there for a while, arms spread, staring at the sky. Somewhere behind him, the water rippled once, the faintest echo of a laugh rising from the deep, so small most ears would miss it. He didn't. He smiled wider, tipping his hat back. "That's it," he said to no one. "You finally found your laugh." Then he turned toward the horizon. The ocean was calm, infinite. A gull screamed overhead. Luffy chuckled, pulled his straw hat tighter, and started walking, one foot after another on the skin of the sea, vanishing slowly into the bright distance, while the world, for the first time in a very long while, stayed completely, mercifully quiet. The horizon shimmered like it was trying to remember how to be endless. Luffy walked, each step leaving a pulse of light that faded almost before it formed. The wind caught at his coat and hat, teasing them toward the east. He didn't steer. The sea had always known where to take him. The storm clouds behind him were already dissolving into colorless mist, and somewhere far below, the creature he had quieted slept inside its new silence, heartbeat syncing with the slow throb of the planet. After a while, the world changed. The water beneath his soles thickened into sheets of drifting ice, then smoothed again into the pale blue of tropical calm. The smell of brine gave way to something cleaner, almost metallic, and the air carried the hum of engines, human engines. Ahead of him rose the shape of a Foundation research vessel, scarred from storms, its white paint scoured down to gray. He could see people on deck moving like ghosts in hazmat suits, pointing instruments into the air, whispering into radios that refused to work. He kept walking. When he reached the ship, the ocean lifted him, setting him level with the rail. The nearest agent froze. His visor reflected nothing but the sea. The man's mouth opened, closed, and the word that escaped was half prayer, half disbelief. "You're not supposed to be real." Luffy grinned, leaning his elbows on the metal rail. "That's what people keep saying." No one moved. They had no protocol for this. He tilted his head, eyes narrowing at the Foundation emblem on their sleeves. "You guys like keeping things locked up, huh?" he said lightly. The commander found his voice, filtered through a speaker. "We protect humanity." "From what?" Luffy asked. "From being afraid?" He didn't sound angry, but his smile was too bright to be comfortable. The commander took a step back. "I took care of your monster," Luffy went on. "Don't look for it. Don't try to fix what's not broken." He started to turn away, then stopped. "Oh, and next time you build cages?" He looked over his shoulder, the sunlight cutting hard across his face. "Make sure they've got doors that open both ways." The ship didn't answer. The ocean did, rising gently under his feet. In a blink, the distance between him and the deck widened. He was walking away again, the sea flattening under his stride. Foundation cameras clicked automatically, but when the footage developed later, every frame where he should have been was burned white, as though light itself had refused to let him be filed. He walked until the ship vanished behind him, until even the sound of engines became memory. The sky dimmed toward dusk. Ahead lay only horizon, a coin edge of silver dividing sea and heaven. For a long time he didn't move. Then he crouched, touching the surface of the water with one finger. It glowed, faint and rhythmic. Far below, in the deep trench where he had left the creature, something answered with the same light. He smiled. "Good," he whispered, "you're learning." The last of the daylight pooled on the horizon, gold melting into violet. He felt the warmth fade, the first stars waking. One blinked brighter than the rest, a pale shimmer like a memory of white skin and fear that had forgotten itself. Luffy watched it for a moment and then laughed, soft and content. "Guess we both found our place." The wind picked up again, tugging him toward the west, toward somewhere that wasn't here. He let it. Each step carried him farther from the place the Foundation would mark as a containment miracle, a closed case. To him, it was just another promise kept. By the time night fell fully, he was gone. Only the glow of his footprints lingered, tracing a path across the water that faded with the tide. In the deep, the sleeping figure of SCP-096 shifted once, its breath a small vibration through stone and salt. For the first time since it had existed, it didn't dream of faces, it dreamed of laughter. The ocean rocked itself back into its rhythm. The stars blinked slower, their light falling like old blessings on a quiet world. And somewhere beyond the curve of that world, where rules end and stories wait to begin again, a man in a straw hat kept walking, humming to himself, his voice merging with the hum of the universe until it was impossible to tell which had started first. Night deepened into something ancient. The ocean wasn't black. It was full of breathing color, threads of blue and green bioluminescence that rose from the trenches, drifting upward like memories too light to stay buried. Each time Luffy stepped, the sea rippled in rings of white light, soft, alive, answering him. He didn't know where he was going, he never did. But he could feel the pull, something quiet, warm, and far away calling to him through the waves. It wasn't a voice, it was laughter. Not loud, not desperate, but free. It came from deep inside the world, the kind that didn't need words or names. He smiled and followed it. The night around him began to change. Clouds gave way to the vast field of stars above, sharp and cold. For the first time in years, the Milky Way stretched clearly across the sky. A scar of light cut open over the sea. He looked up and thought it looked a little like a smile. The same smile the creature might wear one day when it forgot to be afraid. He lay back on the water, letting himself float. The world turned slowly beneath him. He could feel the heartbeat of the ocean under his spine, steady, patient, forgiving. His straw hat tilted over his eyes, catching starlight. He whispered to the dark, "Guess we made it through another weird one, huh?" There was no answer, but a wave lapped against his shoulder, gentle as a nod. He laughed softly. "Yeah, you're right, there'll be more." He turned his head, half expecting to see the outline of a ship, maybe his old crew, maybe the next world waiting. But there was nothing, just horizon. And yet it wasn't lonely. He felt it then. The same pulse of light he'd given to SCP-096, still alive, still echoing, still beating from deep below. It wasn't a curse anymore. It was rhythm, a heartbeat in sync with the world's. He thought about freedom, not as something to chase, but as something you leave behind wherever you walk. He thought about monsters, and how maybe none of them really start that way. He thought about the Foundation, and how they'd write their reports. Subject neutralized, cause unknown. Maybe they'd never realize the anomaly wasn't destroyed, it was healed. A shooting star cut across the sky. He raised a hand lazily as if to catch it, and for a second, the whole ocean glowed gold again. A single line of light stretching from horizon to horizon. When it faded, the night returned to blue. Somewhere very far away, a child woke from a nightmare and didn't scream. A researcher at Site 19 turned off the lights in an empty observation cell and thought he heard a laugh in the vents, small and human. And in the deepest part of the ocean, something that once had no face dreamed of dawn. Luffy turned his eyes toward the stars and grinned. "Another adventure's waiting," he said softly. Then he stood, water holding him like solid ground, the world's reflection wrapped around his ankles. He tipped his hat, stretched his arms once, and began walking toward the light on the horizon. Every few steps, the sea behind him shimmered gold, as if the universe itself was laughing along. And the night went on, quiet, endless, alive with the echo of one simple truth. Freedom was contagious. The dawn arrived like a secret being told slowly. At first it was just a blush of color at the edge of the water, the faintest warmth creeping under the cold. The waves were tired but curious, rolling in tiny hums that kept time with the slow beat of the world beneath them. Luffy's shadow stretched long and thin across the waking sea. He walked as if he'd always been here, just another story wearing human shape. The straw hat caught the first touch of sunlight, turning its edge gold. Salt clung to his hair, to the scars on his hands, to every line that said he'd fought and laughed and refused to quit. The wind rose, carrying scents from nowhere, flowers, smoke, spices, dust. It wasn't just air moving, it was the world whispering, "Go on." And he did. Ahead, the horizon shimmered with a shape, something that looked like an island but wasn't. It floated too high, light bending around it. He squinted, grin tilting. "You hiding another secret up there?" The sky didn't answer. It never did. But the ocean laughed, throwing sunlight like coins. He pressed his foot down on the reflection and jumped. The sea obeyed, slingshotting him upward in a column of water that broke through clouds. Air turned thin, cold. Mist streaked around him, leaving trails of gold from his aura. He burst through the upper haze into still air, a sky painted with pink and silver. The island was there after all, hovering in the calm. No land, just a circle of old stone ruins floating on nothing, humming faintly. He landed lightly, the stones bending under his weight and settling again. Symbols carved into them glowed faint blue. They weren't SCP markings. They were older, letters curved like waves. He crouched, tracing one with a fingertip. It pulsed once in recognition. A whisper rose from the stones, not words, just tone. A voice that wasn't a person's. It was the memory of the ocean speaking through something it had lost long ago. Luffy closed his eyes. The sound was gentle, full of sorrow and gratitude. He didn't understand all of it, but he knew the feeling. It was the same the creature had made in his arms when it finally stopped screaming. He smiled, stood, and looked at the sky. "You don't have to thank me," he said quietly. "Just keep the seas calm for a while." The stones dimmed, the hum fading into silence. The island trembled, and he felt the first pull downward, the magic releasing its hold. "Guess that's my cue." He leaped off the edge. The wind caught him, tearing laughter out of his chest. He fell for miles, spinning, arms wide, until the sea reached up and caught him again like a friend. When he surfaced, dawn had broken fully. The light painted everything gold and white, erasing all signs of what had happened. Even the air tasted clean, like the world had been washed. He looked toward the rising sun. It looked back as if daring him to keep chasing it. He grinned. "All right then, let's see what's next." And he started walking again, across the shining water toward the light, leaving behind nothing but ripples that glowed faintly for a heartbeat before fading back into the calm sea. Somewhere deep beneath him, a shape slept in peace, and above, in the new morning sky, the wind whispered the name it didn't know it remembered. Luffy. The ocean as always smiled. By mid-morning, the sea had turned into a mirror. Every ripple folded sunlight into itself, smooth and endless, the kind of calm that made the world forget it ever knew storms. Luffy walked until the air itself began to shimmer, heat bending light, horizon trembling like it couldn't decide whether to exist. He stopped, hands in his pockets, eyes half closed under the brim of his hat. For a moment, he thought he saw something in the reflection. The ghost of a ship. Its sails were white and frayed, its flag torn to threads by years of wind. But even half faded, the symbol on that flag was unmistakable. A skull grinning beneath a straw hat. His chest tightened. The reflection rippled and vanished. He laughed once, low and warm, rubbing his neck. "Guess I still miss you guys." The wind shifted. He could almost hear voices on it. Fragments of familiar laughter, the thud of footsteps on wood, the slam of barrels rolling on deck. He didn't turn. He knew it wasn't real. But maybe it was enough. He closed his eyes and listened, and for a heartbeat, he could almost believe the world hadn't split into different universes, hadn't buried his crew behind stories and anomalies. When he opened his eyes, the sea in front of him was different again. The water had darkened, not from clouds, but from depth, so deep it looked like ink. And far ahead, cutting across the horizon, rose a thin wall of fog, standing like a curtain between him and everything beyond. He tilted his head. "You're new." He walked toward it. The closer he came, the more the fog moved, breathing in and out, alive. Shapes flickered inside it, eyes, gears, lights, cities turning inside themselves. He grinned. "So this is the next world, huh?" The fog didn't answer. It just waited. Waves lapped gently at his calves as if urging him forward. He adjusted his hat, took a deep breath, and stepped into the mist. Instantly, the world fell away. There was no sound, no horizon, no up or down, just motion like being pulled through water that wasn't water. Images flickered across his vision. Places he'd never seen. Voices that didn't belong to this version of him. A mountain splitting in half. A child laughing inside a metal cell. A hand of light reaching towards something vast and unseen. He kept walking, unbothered. He'd seen worse between heartbeats, then sudden stillness. He stepped out into a new world. The sky was gray, heavy, humming faintly like a machine left running too long. Below him stretched fields of smooth black metal, not water. The wind carried the scent of ozone and iron. No sea, no trees, no life. Only towers, endless, sharp, and silent, each one glowing faintly with SCP Foundation sigils. He whistled. "You sure don't take breaks, huh?" He took a few steps forward, listening to the metallic hum under his boots. Every step echoed like a heartbeat in a hollow chest. At the edge of his hearing, he caught something faint, like a whisper trapped inside static. A designation unknown. Entity breach from Sector Null. Anomalous signature matches SCP-096 containment resonance. He looked up. The gray sky flickered once, then steadied. The voice repeated itself louder, as if the world was waking up to notice him. He sighed, scratching his head. "So even here, huh? Guess I didn't just fix one world." A door formed in the air in front of him, thin lines of white light sketching the outline of steel before filling it in solid. It slid open with a hiss. Beyond it, darkness, faintly pulsing red. He grinned again. "All right, mystery door, let's see what kind of trouble you've got waiting." He stepped through. The door closed behind him, dissolving into nothing. And somewhere in the foundation of this new machine-colored world, a whisper rippled through the wires. He carries laughter. The light in the sky pulsed once, and the horizon began to breathe again. Inside, the darkness was not empty. It moved like water, folding over itself in currents that carried whispers and memories. Each step Luffy took sent concentric waves of light through the black floor, faint, rhythmic, as if the space were alive and listening. He felt no walls, but the air changed the deeper he went, colder, denser, humming with low energy. Every breath tasted metallic, like lightning before a storm. He kept walking unfazed, his straw hat tilted just enough to keep the glow from his eyes out of his face. After what might have been minutes or years, the dark began to thin. Lines of crimson light flickered in the air, resolving into patterns, circles, runes, SCP containment symbols written in impossible geometry. He recognized one of them immediately, the sigil of SCP-001, but distorted, reconfigured as if someone had tried to rewrite it. "Guess I've been here before," he said softly. A hum answered him. The light gathered into a shape, a humanoid outline, tall and featureless, its body built from thousands of floating containment seals rotating slowly. It had no face, but it watched him. When it spoke, its voice came from everywhere, male, female, mechanical, human, all at once. "Unauthorized entity detected. You are not meant to exist in this sector." Luffy folded his arms, grinning. "That's what people keep telling me." The figure tilted its head. "You altered the structure of SCP-096's reality field. Explain." He shrugged. "Didn't like seeing it suffer, so I stopped it. Containment anomalies must not be altered without clearance." He laughed. "Then I guess I'm still a pirate." The red lights around him brightened, spreading across the chamber until it looked like he was standing inside a beating heart made of machinery. The voice hardened. "Your interference destabilized several layers of containment. Reality integrity is at 87%. Further deviation will result in failure cascade." Luffy tilted his head. "So what you're saying is the world's breaking again?" "Affirmative." He scratched his chin. "All right, guess I'll just fix it then." There was a pause. Even the hum stilled, like the entire system was trying to understand the absurdity of what he'd just said. "Correction. Such action is not possible." "Possible," he said with a grin, "is just a word for something that hasn't met me yet." The figure's light pulsed once. The runes above began to spin faster, and the floor split apart beneath him, revealing an abyss filled with red static. "Unauthorized reality alteration in progress. Engaging failsafe." The air vibrated. From the void below, shapes began to rise. Swarms of containment drones, skeletal metal constructs with eyes of burning light. They surrounded him in perfect formation, hundreds, then thousands, the hum of their cores blending into a single mechanical chant. Luffy stretched his arms casually, fingers cracking. "Guess I've got company." The first drone fired, a lance of energy that vaporized the space where he'd been standing. But he wasn't there anymore. He was above them, grinning, spinning mid-air, coat fluttering as he wound his fist back. "Gomu, Gomu, no!" The room shuddered. His fist stretched past sight, glowing white gold, and when it came down, it hit the floor like laughter made solid. The blast tore through the chamber, bending light, collapsing geometry. The drones folded in half, then in quarters, then into nothing. The voice came back, distorted now. Containment breach escalated. Probability of collapse 99%. "Then we better make it quick," he shouted, jumping into the air again, the ground below him turning to fluid gold under his feet. Every strike, every laugh tore another layer off the red system until the walls around him started to peel away, revealing glimpses of something beyond, a storm of light and shadow, the border of all realities he'd ever touched. He felt the pull of it, the same current that had dragged him from world to world since the first time he'd slipped between universes. He could see the worlds overlapping now. Seas, islands, cities, and endless corridors of containment. All of them shuddering in sync, breaking free from the old rules. The voice tried again, quieter now. "Entity Luffy, why do you persist?" He landed lightly, wiping dust off his cheek, eyes glowing. "Because there's always something worth saving, even if it scares you. This system cannot comprehend mercy." "Then maybe it's time someone taught you." He raised his hands. His aura erupted, pure white now, too bright to look at. It spread through the collapsing space, turning red to gold, sound to laughter. Every seal, every symbol melted into motion, rewritten not as locks but as songs. Outside, the sensors at Site 19, Site 13, and every surviving Foundation outpost all went blind at once. Telemetry overloaded. Reality bled light through the sky. For a single second, every ocean on every world turned calm, and in that second, Luffy's voice echoed across all of it. "Let's make it a world where nobody needs to be locked up." The chamber exploded. Light swallowed everything. When it faded, there was no metal, no drones, no voice. Just open sea again, stretching forever. The sun burned brighter than it had in years, and the horizon shimmered with promise. Luffy stood alone, his straw hat in one hand, the other raised toward the light. He grinned. "Now that's freedom." And as the tide rose to meet him, somewhere deep in the silence, the world itself laughed back. The light didn't fade, it breathed. Every color he had ever known, and some that no ocean had ever dared to show, spilled across the horizon like new paint over old scars. The sky bent, cracked, and healed itself in waves of gold and blue, each pulse matching his heartbeat. He stood still, watching. For a long time, the world said nothing. Then from somewhere beneath the waves, a sound rose, soft, rhythmic, like someone knocking gently on the door between realities. He smiled. "So, you made it too, huh?" The sea answered by glowing faintly white. Bubbles rose and broke into light, forming a vague outline. A face he couldn't see but recognized anyway. SCP-096. Its head still wrapped in cloudlight, floating upright in the calm water, no longer trembling. The golden shimmer around it matched his aura perfectly, two tones humming in harmony. It wasn't screaming. It wasn't hiding. It was simply there. Luffy walked across the water toward it. Each step left ripples of silver that drifted outward like laughter. When he reached it, the creature tilted its head, listening. "Feels better, doesn't it?" he said quietly. No response came, but he felt it. A pulse of agreement through the water, subtle and warm. He placed a hand on its shoulder. "You're free now. Not contained, not hunted, just living. That's what it's supposed to be like." The creature twitched once, then stilled, the mist around its head tightening slightly, like a bow being tied. Then something unexpected happened. The light around them bent upward, forming a spiral that reached toward the sky. Wind gathered, not violent but strong enough to lift his hair and ripple the sea. Above, the air split into color, white, red, gold, and the faintest hint of blue. He recognized that hue instantly. Across the horizon, another figure was walking on the waves. Small at first, just a silhouette cut out of light. Each step it took turned the sea beneath it solid, fractal, like glass. When it came closer, he saw what it was. A projection. A mirage of a person wearing a white lab coat marked with the SCP insignia. No face, no shadow, only presence. The air trembled around them. "Entity Luffy," the voice said, calm and distant. "You have restructured the containment lattice of all known dimensions." He tilted his head. "You say that like it's a bad thing." The voice didn't change. "Freedom and containment are the same shape when scaled infinitely. You have simply redrawn the cage." He laughed. "Maybe, but at least now the doors open both ways." The projection studied him, or seemed to. Behind it, the sky flickered with faint outlines of thousands of worlds, some still broken, some already healing. In each, he could feel the hum of laughter and waves returning to rhythm. The voice spoke again. "If balance fails again, will you intervene?" He smiled, slow and bright. "If someone needs me to. And if no one does?" He tipped his hat down over his eyes. "Then I'll go find someone who does." The projection was silent for a long time. Then, almost softly, "Understood." Its form dissolved into white mist, scattering upward like ash into sunrise. Luffy looked back at SCP-096. The creature had turned toward him fully now, still blindfolded, still silent, but its chest rose steady, calm. He gave it a nod. "Take care of this world, yeah? I've got places to be." The sea around them rippled once, answering. He stepped backward, then turned. The ocean spread before him like an open road. The wind was clean again, carrying the promise of far-off laughter and islands yet unimagined. He stretched, muscles cracking like ropes being uncoiled, and with that easy, unbreakable grin said to the world, "All right then, let's see what's next." He took a step and vanished. For a while, the sea held his footprints in gold before they sank into blue. And in the silence that followed, SCP-096 lifted its head toward the light it could not see. It made a sound, not a scream, not a cry, a chuckle, small, soft, but unmistakably human. Far above, in the repaired layers of reality, the Foundation's terminals flickered awake one by one. New data appeared under a single heading, L0001, the laughing variable status, uncontainable, effect, stabilizing. Then the screens went dark again, leaving only a faint reflection of a straw hat and a smile. And somewhere, beyond worlds, beyond walls, a man kept walking, humming to himself, his song echoing through every universe that ever learned to laugh. The hum never really stopped. It threaded itself through everything, the rustle of air between dimensions, the pull of tides on invisible shores, the whisper of atoms trading stories as they drifted. Wherever that sound touched, the world remembered how to breathe. Some called it a resonance, others a miracle. But to Luffy, it was just the rhythm of walking. He didn't know how long it had been since he'd left the last world behind. Here, time wasn't linear. It stretched like his arms used to, looping back and forward, sometimes laughing at itself. Each step he took landed on something new, sometimes water, sometimes light, sometimes the edge of a thought trying to become a planet. He didn't question it. He'd learned long ago that freedom wasn't about understanding. It was about moving. At some point, the sea beneath him turned into glass. Beneath the transparent surface, entire universes spun in miniature. Tiny orbs of light and shadow turning lazily, their orbits drawing complex patterns. He crouched, peering down at one. Inside it, he could see a sun rising over what looked like a familiar coastline. A faint outline of ships, laughter, maybe even a straw hat. He grinned, pressing his palm to the surface. "Keep going," he whispered, voice carrying across more realities than he could count. "Don't stop laughing." The orbs pulsed in reply, as though they understood. He stood again, stretching, feeling the crack of bone and air in a body that no longer aged. Then the world shifted. The light bent, and from far away came a sound that didn't belong here, mechanical, insistent, like a bell that refused to stop ringing. He turned toward it. A line of red began to appear across the horizon, slicing the emptiness in half. He frowned, shading his eyes. "Another problem, huh?" The red grew brighter, expanding until it became a storm of symbols. The Foundation's containment sigils, fracturing, burning, melting into chaos. It wasn't the Scarlet King this time, nor SCP-096's scream. It was something else, cold, deliberate, logical. A voice boomed across the void, deep and synthetic. "Global reinitialization protocol engaged. Anomalous reality field breach. Source, the laughing variable." Luffy tilted his head. "That's me, isn't it?" The sky began to split. Lines of white code unraveled, tearing open the fabric of existence. Through the cracks, he could see the old worlds again, some bright, some still bleeding, some already rebuilding. All of them shaking. The system, whatever it was trying to erase him. He took a deep breath and exhaled, his breath forming golden mist that didn't disperse. "Guess the universe doesn't like jokes that last too long." The voice thundered again. "Containment priority. Absolute entity L001 to be erased." A dozen beams of sterile white light dropped from the sky, forming a cage of energy around him. He stood in the center of it, arms crossed, unimpressed. "You really don't get it, do you?" The lights closed in, tightening until there was no space left. Then, with the easy motion of someone flicking an insect away, he reached out and touched one of the beams. It bent. Reality again decided it would rather play along than argue. The cage crumpled, the beams twisting into a spiral that spun around him. Every fragment of containment light turned gold, melting into warmth. He stepped forward, letting it wash over him. "Contain me, erase me, rewrite me, it doesn't matter," he said, and his voice carried across all frequencies, from human ears to cosmic sensors. "Freedom isn't something you can delete." The system screamed in binary. "Error, undefined result." He laughed, a short, bright sound that made even the code hesitate. Then he lifted one hand. The light obeyed, wrapping around his arm like sunlight caught in motion. "Let's fix this properly." He snapped his fingers. The universe inverted. For a moment, everything went silent. Then all the broken containment fields across all worlds synchronized. Every anomaly, every forgotten experiment, every cursed object, the ones that were dangerous, the ones that were lonely, all of them pulsed once, like hearts remembering their first beat. The containment walls didn't shatter. They opened, and what came out wasn't chaos, it was relief. The Foundation archives would later register the event as the Laughing Reset. Every recorded anomaly lost its hostility. Every scream became a sigh. Every dead file flickered with a faint line of code. Containment unnecessary, freedom stabilized. When it was over, the voice returned, quiet this time, almost reverent. System recalibrated. Luffy stood alone again, staring at the horizon. The red had faded. The worlds below were glowing brighter now, spinning peacefully. He smiled. "See? Told you. No cages." He put his hands behind his head and started walking again, his reflection trailing light. Each step created a new possibility. Each laugh rewrote another law. Somewhere behind him, deep in the machinery of creation, a line of text appeared and stayed, impossible to erase. Variable L0001 acknowledged. Result, freedom sustained. Status, eternal traveler. And as the last traces of containment dissolved into dawn, Luffy laughed again, loud, pure, and endless. The kind of sound that could teach even gods how to smile. The laughter rolled outward, echoing through layers of worlds like ripples crossing a bottomless lake. It traveled past galaxies, down through ruins where machines still recited rules no one remembered writing, through oceans that had long forgotten what light felt like, through caverns where SCP designations floated like dust motes. Wherever it passed, the hum of fear slackened. Chains dissolved into quiet. Systems that only knew how to measure danger faltered for a heartbeat and forgot their purpose. Luffy kept walking. He didn't fly, didn't run. The world simply moved to meet him. Each step carried him from one horizon to another. He saw them all now, realities stacked like waves. Some were still full of color, some gray, some frozen mid-breath, but each one had life again. Creatures that had spent eternity hiding behind protocols blinked into the open. Things that once tore apart anything that looked at them now stared at sunrise without screaming. The world was learning how to be unafraid. At some point, he stopped. The road beneath him, if you could call it a road, was made of light folded into itself, an endless path that curved through the void. Ahead stood an archway of stone and starlight, covered in symbols older than any SCP code. Beyond it was only brightness, the kind that made shadows unnecessary. He rubbed his chin. "That where you want me to go next?" The air thickened, a voice whispering through it, not threatening this time, just curious. "Where will you go if everything is free?" He laughed softly. "Then I'll go where there's nobody left to laugh yet. And when there's nowhere left, then I'll make somewhere new." The light shivered, almost amused. "That is how universes begin," it said, fading back into the hum. He grinned, pushed the hat down tight over his eyes, and stepped through the archway. For an instant, there was no up or down, no sound, just the quiet awareness of everything breathing at once. Then came color. An entire ocean of it, raw and unshaped. He could feel worlds waiting to happen inside it. The place was empty but full of possibility, like a blank page with a heartbeat. He smiled, dipped his fingers into the glow, and drew a line. It curved into a horizon. He laughed again, and the sound became wind. When he blinked, there was water under his feet and a sky overhead. He wasn't sure if it was a new world or just another version of the old one, but it didn't matter. A gull cried somewhere far off, and the scent of salt hit him like a memory. He looked down. His shadow stretched across the waves, and for the first time since the laughter began, it looked perfectly human. "I guess it's a good start," he said. He took a step, and the sea accepted him, warm and familiar. Somewhere, very faintly, he thought he heard other voices. Names he knew, laughter that matched his own, carried on the wind. He didn't look back. He never did. The path ahead was endless, and that was exactly how he liked it. As he walked, the light behind him faded into calm, leaving a universe that no longer needed cages, only the memory of a man who taught it how to smile. And the world went on, quiet, free, alive, its heartbeat keeping time with his footsteps until both became the same sound, a simple rhythm, steady and bright, like laughter. He kept walking. There was no horizon anymore, only the soft curve of color meeting color, like the edge of a dream that refused to end. The ocean under his feet shimmered between gold and silver, changing with every breath he took. Above him, stars rearranged themselves without sound, whole constellations folding and unfolding, forming shapes of people, beasts, and old friends long gone. They seemed to follow him, not as watchers, but as memories keeping pace. He smiled. "You're all still out there, huh?" The wind answered with warmth. Somewhere in that breeze, he could swear he heard Brooks laugh, Sanji's curse, Nami's scolding, and Usopp's tall tales. For a moment, the sea beneath him became a deck of wood, creaking like the sunny under sunlight. He could almost smell the stew. It wasn't nostalgia, it was the universe remembering joy. He stopped walking. In front of him, the sea rippled once and something began to rise. At first, he thought it was an island, but it was too deliberate. The water pulled itself upward, forming a mirror, huge, clear, alive. Inside it, he saw reflections of every world he'd touched. SCP containment cells now empty, quiet. Planets that used to scream now blooming with new life. Children playing on streets that were once locked behind quarantine signs. He saw freedom, real and imperfect, messy and alive. And behind all that, in the deepest reflection, he saw himself standing where he was, infinite and small all at once. His grin softened. "Guess I did all right." The mirror trembled. From its depths, a voice, old, soft, and full of something between pride and melancholy, spoke. "Will you stay?" He tilted his head. "Stay? Nah, there's always another sea. You have unmade the cages. The world no longer needs you." He shrugged. "Maybe not, but I still need it." "To do what?" He laughed. "To see what it becomes." The mirror began to dissolve, its surface breaking apart into motes of light that scattered like fireflies. Each one drifted upward, becoming stars in a new sky. He watched them go until only one remained, hovering in front of him. A single spark of white flame. It pulsed once, twice, like a heartbeat, He raised his finger and tapped it gently. "Go on then," he whispered. "You're free too." The spark shot upward, cutting through the clouds like a comet. The sky brightened in its wake. For a moment, day and night existed at once. He sighed, looking around at the sea that stretched in every direction. "Guess that's that." He looked up, squinting at the new constellations. Then he smiled. Wider, lighter. The kind of smile that belonged to someone who never learned how to stop. "All right then, one more adventure." He took off running, barefoot, laughing, the sea flashing gold under every step. The stars above mirrored his path, forming a spiral of light that followed him wherever he went. The laughter grew louder, brighter, until it wasn't just his, it was the oceans, the winds, the world's. And when he finally disappeared into the horizon, the sea didn't fall silent. It kept laughing for him, soft, endless, alive. In the archives of the last Foundation world, one final entry appeared without authorization. L001, final status. Entity has transcended classification, containment obsolete. Effect, universal harmonization. Secondary result, spontaneous laughter detected across all inhabited zones. Termination impossible. Conclusion, freedom achieved. The file closed itself. And far beyond the reach of any observer, on a sea that had no map, a man in a straw hat kept walking, each step turning silence into music, each laugh rewriting the shape of the stars. At first, there was only the rhythm of his steps, tap, ripple, light, tap, ripple, light. Each echo lingered a little longer than the last until the sound wasn't just on the water anymore. It was inside everything, the air, the distant stars, the thin membrane of space that separated one universe from another. He walked until the color of the sea changed again, this time darkening into something that wasn't blue or black but a shade made of memory. It felt old, like the pause between one breath and the next. Ahead, the sky was no longer sky, it was a vast circle turning slowly as if the whole of existence had become an enormous eye trying to focus on him. Luffy stopped. He pushed the hat back on his head and grinned up at it. "You again?" The eye blinked. The horizon shook. A voice rolled across everything, not cruel, not kind, just tired. "You changed the pattern. There was supposed to be order, containment, predictability." He scratched his cheek. "Didn't like the pattern. People were hurting. Now nothing is contained. Chaos will grow again." He shrugged. "Then someone else will laugh again. Fix it their way. That's how it's supposed to go." The light from the eye flickered. "And you? Are you finished?" He looked down at his reflection, one of 1,000, scattered like mirrors on the water. In each one, a different version of him looked back. Younger, older, battle-scarred, peaceful, human, myth. All of them smiling. "Not yet," he said. "As long as there's one world that forgot how to smile, I've got a job." The voice hesitated. You will never rest." He laughed soft and bright. "That's freedom too." The eye closed. The circle of the sky began to dissolve into smaller lights, drifting upward like lanterns at a festival. Each one left a trail that curved across the dark until the whole cosmos looked like it was laughing with him. He took a deep breath, and the air tasted of salt again. Somewhere far below, waves began to form, the first real waves this new ocean had ever made. The world was remaking itself using laughter as gravity. He crouched, placed a hand on the surface. "You'll be fine," he told it. "Just remember to keep moving." The sea answered with a single, steady pulse, as if promising. He straightened, stretched his arms toward the stars, and said, "Let's go see what's beyond the end of things." The horizon split open, not violently, but like a curtain being pulled aside. Behind it was light, not white, not gold, just light, pure and simple. It hummed faintly, the same tune the ocean had been humming since the beginning. He grinned, took one step, and walked straight into it. The sea closed behind him. The light folded inward, sealing the gap with a sound like a heartbeat. And for a very long time, everything was still. Then somewhere in the vast quiet, a ripple formed. It moved outward, slow and patient. At its center, a single voice, his, whispered to the dark, "Your turn now." A spark ignited where the ripple had begun. It bloomed into a tiny sun, then another and another. The new universe began laughing itself awake. If anyone could have stood there to see it, they might have noticed that the pattern of its galaxies curved just slightly, forming the faint outline of a grin. The grin hung in the dark, like a secret the universe didn't mind sharing. Each galaxy spun faster, flinging sparks of light that stretched into whole constellations. Nebulae unfurled in slow motion, their clouds tinted gold and white. Every few seconds, one of them pulsed in rhythm with that lingering hum. Luffy's laugh turned into cosmic heartbeat. The new world didn't rush to take shape. It drifted, thought about what it wanted to be. Rivers of stardust wound together, forming the first planets. Some bloomed with water immediately, others waited for storms. On each one, something small began to move, droplets that remembered warmth, stones that remembered touch. They weren't alive yet, not the way people understood life, but they were listening. And somewhere inside that still-forming space, the horizon bent again. He stepped out of the light like it was a doorway, barefoot, hair damp with salt that belonged to no sea. The hat was still on his head, its rim glowing faintly. For the first time in what felt like eternity, he wasn't walking on water or glass or air. He was standing on dirt, new dirt, the kind that hadn't decided what color it wanted to be yet. He crouched, grabbed a handful, and let it sift through his fingers. It shimmered, turning briefly into the image of 1,000 faces laughing before falling back into dust. "Nice place," he said. The air here didn't carry sound yet. It just translated thought into warmth. Still, something in it stirred when he spoke. A swirl of light gathered, forming vague outlines of creatures, half fish, half bird, half whatever they felt like. They circled him curiously. "Hey there," he said. "You're early." The lights hovered close, pulsing in colors that might have meant curiosity. He chuckled. "You'll figure it out. Just don't build cages, yeah? The sky's big enough." The creatures scattered, leaving trails of color that stuck in the air and became the first aurora. He watched them for a long time, smiling softly, then looked upward. The stars here were still newborn, trembling like fireflies. He could feel the hum behind them, the same steady pulse he'd left behind in the old worlds. The echo of laughter never died. It just found new voices. A wind rose, real wind this time, carrying dust and the faint scent of rain. He closed his eyes and breathed in deeply. Smells like adventure. He started walking again because he didn't know how not to. The ground lit up beneath his steps, each footprint leaving behind tiny sprouts of light that slowly took root. growing into plants, then into whole forests that whispered his name in the language of rustling leaves. When night came again, and here night was simply when the stars wanted to be louder, the sky painted itself with the shape of a straw hat. A soft line of text shimmered in the void above the newborn world, written in no language but understood by everything that saw it. Eldera 001 complete, freedom achieved. The traveler continues beyond the map, and somewhere beyond even that new sky, in the spaces between possibilities, another voice, small and uncertain, began to laugh for the first time. He heard it. He grinned. "That's how it starts," he said, hands tucked behind his head as he looked up at a sky that would never stop expanding. He turned his back to the light, and the horizon rippled open one last time, waiting for him. He stepped through it without hesitation, leaving behind a world that already knew how to smile. The ripples faded, the stars steadied, the hum settled into the heartbeat of everything that would ever exist. And wherever that rhythm reached, someone, something, would always remember the story of the man who taught creation itself to laugh. He emerged into somewhere that wasn't a place yet, more like an unfinished thought. Colors drifted like fog. Gravity hadn't decided which way was down. Every sound he made came back slower, as though even echoes were new here. Luffy floated for a moment, hat shadowing his eyes, grin already starting. "So this is the edge of everything," he said. "Kinda quiet." The quiet rippled, thinking about it. A voice, not loud but everywhere, answered, "You made it quiet. You unmade all the noise." He stretched, joints cracking, utterly unbothered. "Then I guess it's time to start the next song." The space around him brightened, shifting from fog into light that carried memory. Waves, laughter, fragments of stars that remembered what warmth used to feel like. He stepped forward, and the nothing under him decided to become a surface, just to keep up. "That's better," he said. Now where was I? Now, images formed in the light as he walked, pieces of the worlds he had passed through. SCP facilities rebuilt as gardens, cities learning to live without fear, monsters dreaming instead of screaming. And in the middle of it all, a single thread of gold weaving through every scene, his laughter looping, unbroken. He stopped, watching the thread twist into a circle before him. It wasn't a portal this time. It was a memory. On the other side, the old sea rolled under a younger sun. The smell of salt and tangerines drifted through. He saw a ship, the Thousand Sunny, cutting across the horizon. For a heartbeat, he saw faces: Nami's, Zoro's, Sanji's, Usopp's, Chopper's, Robin's, Frankie's, Brooks, Jinbei's, all of them laughing. His chest tightened, not with sadness, but something bigger, heavier, like joy that never found a home. The voice came again, quieter now. "Do you miss them?" He smiled. "You don't miss the sea," he said. "You just sail it again." "You could go back." He shook his head. "They've got their own stories now. I already gave mine away." The golden circle pulsed once, bright enough to paint the fog in color, then folded into a small glowing orb that floated beside him. "All right," he said softly, cupping it in one hand. "Then let's make some new stories." He tossed the orb upward. It exploded into a billion fragments, new stars, new beginnings. Each one curved away into the dark, leaving trails of light. From somewhere far beyond sight, new laughter answered his. He nodded, satisfied. He walked until the stars grew denser again, until light felt heavy. Ahead, space itself began to spin. At its center was something vast, a whirlpool of creation, swallowing and giving back worlds in equal measure. The voice spoke one last time. "If you step in, you'll start it all again. You'll be part of the next story." He grinned, eyes burning white gold. "Good. Wouldn't want to miss the beginning." He stepped forward. The whirlpool brightened, wrapping him in ribbons of color. His hat flew off, spinning upward. His laughter followed it, echoing through the storm of light. The spiral swallowed him whole, And then, from the center of that impossible brightness, a single sound rippled outward. A heartbeat, then another, then a laugh. Galaxies began to bloom again, carried by that rhythm. Suns formed, seas stirred, winds found new names to whisper. At the edge of the newborn universe, a tiny planet rolled into orbit under a brand new sky. Its first dawn cracked open quietly, and the breeze that came with it carried a faint, familiar hum. The sound of someone laughing far away, as if the act of creation itself were a joke worth sharing. And so the cycle began again. A world, a sea, a dream, and the echo of a straw hat drifting through the light, reminding every new thing that to live was to move, and to move was to be free. The new world opened its eyes. It didn't know yet that it had eyes, or that seeing was something the living did. But light touched its surface, and the planet understood instinctively that it was awake. The seas were newborn, their salt still learning how to sting. The air trembled with the first warmth of a sun that had only existed for a few breaths. From its still-forming crust came a sound, low, rolling, ancient, like the laughter of stone learning how to speak. And then, across the pale horizon, the first shape walked. He wasn't human anymore, not exactly. His outline shimmered between light and body, presence and idea, the echo of every step he'd ever taken. His hat hung loose over his head, shadowing eyes that reflected galaxies. He stretched once, wide and lazy, as if the act itself told the sky it was allowed to exist. "Still works," he said, voice soft enough that the wind borrowed it and carried it everywhere. The wind became speech. Trees unfurled, mountains remembered how to rise. Rivers followed the sound and found their beds. Every living thing the planet would ever have came from that first vibration. He crouched beside a pool that had been waiting for reflection and dipped a finger in. The ripples split into hundreds of tiny lights that drifted away, turning into the first souls. "Go on," he whispered, "find your seas." A long time passed. Seconds, centuries, it didn't matter here. The world learned quickly. Where he walked, life followed. Reefs blooming in his wake, forests standing up from dust. Each creature that woke carried a tiny fragment of laughter in its heart, an unconscious rhythm that made them look toward the sky whenever they needed courage. Eventually, he stopped at the highest peak, where the horizon was big enough to hold the future. He sat cross-legged, hat pulled low, watching the first storm gather over the newborn ocean. Lightning forked once, the flash mirrored in his smile. "Good," he said. "You'll need a few storms." The thunder answered, not with fear but excitement. Rain began to fall, each drop catching a glint of his light as it touched ground. Where they landed, the first people would someday build fires, tell stories, and laugh without knowing why. He stood again, brushing dust off his knees. The world didn't need him anymore, not directly. It had learned the rhythm on its own. He looked upward. The sky was already seeding stars. Somewhere beyond them, the rest of the multiverse pulsed, waiting. A quiet voice rose from the earth below him, warm and full. "Will you stay this time?" He chuckled. "Nah, you're doing fine without me." "Then where will you go?" He tapped his chest, where the glow had dimmed to a soft ember. "Wherever this laugh ends up." He took off the hat, held it against his chest for a moment, then let it go. The wind caught it immediately, sending it spinning upward. It rose until it was just another speck among the stars, still turning, still smiling. He looked after it, eyes half closed, and said quietly, "That's freedom right there." The air shimmered once more. Then his form scattered into light. Not dying, not vanishing, just dissolving into motion. The light spread outward, threading itself into every breeze, every wave, every laugh that would ever exist. On the new world, when night finally came, its first inhabitants looked up at the bright band of stars and saw one shaped like a wide-brimmed hat. They didn't know its name. They just felt happy when they saw it. And far beyond that sky, in the great deep where universes are born and remade, the rhythm continued. Step, ripple, light. Step, ripple, laughter. The traveler had not ended. He was simply everywhere the idea of freedom decided to begin again. And so the rhythm continued. A long time passed. Longer than ages could measure, longer than even light could count. Civilizations rose across that young world. They built ships to cross oceans, towers to kiss the clouds. Stories to explain why laughter sometimes echoed in the wind when no one was there. They gave that sound a name, the sailor's song, a myth about a spirit who walked the sea before time began, who taught the waves how to dance and the stars how to listen. They said he carried no weapon, only a smile, and wherever he went, storms grew gentle. And they weren't wrong, because sometimes when the moon hung low over the water and the tides were too quiet, he came back. Not in full shape, just a shimmer, a reflection of the man who once was. Fishermen swore they saw footprints glowing faintly on the surface of the sea. Children claimed that when they laughed hard enough, they could hear a faint reply, one that made their hearts race with joy instead of fear. He never stayed long, just long enough to nudge the world a little when it forgot how to move forward, long enough to remind people that rules were never stronger than hope, and then he would be gone again, walking beyond the horizon into the parts of the universe still dark and silent. Across realities, other worlds began to feel it too. Planets that had never known oceans suddenly dreamed of them. Stars pulsed in strange rhythms that matched the old sea's heartbeat. Somewhere deep inside a Foundation archive, what little was left of one, a terminal blinked awake after millennia of silence. The screen showed only one message, repeating endlessly. 00001 signal detected. Stability index, 100%. Source unknown. Description: a resonance composed entirely of laughter. The technician on duty, an AI that had outlived its creators, recorded the anomaly and waited for further data. Then faintly through its sensors, it heard something impossible. Waves. The AI hesitated, running self-diagnostics. Its logs had no record of oceans. It didn't even have speakers, yet the sound filled the room. And then beneath that sound, a voice spoke, warm, calm, amused. "You're still watching, huh? That's good. Somebody's got to keep the stories safe." Before it could respond, the voice faded, leaving behind static that almost sounded like laughter. The AI added one last line to the record. Note: containment unnecessary. Possible classification, concept of freedom, status active in all known realities. The log closed itself, and for the first time in its long mechanical existence, the AI paused its work and somehow smiled. Because far beyond sensors, across seas of light and void, the traveler was still walking. Each step a heartbeat, each laugh a spark, moving forever toward whatever world had forgotten how to be free. And the universe, every universe, listened and laughed with him.